Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what I'm sure will be a wonderfully inspiring and engaging conversation. Today, we're really thrilled to host our first Vital Voices Northwest speaker event featuring inspiring women leaders in the Northwest region. Before we begin, we'd like to thank the Vital Voices Northwest Council for their support and a special thank you to Rasha Kamia and Event Horizon for co-hosting this wonderful event. For those of you that are not familiar with the Northwest Council, it's a community of passionate individuals from various sectors committed to building a supporter base and partnerships in the Seattle area to advance women's leadership and inspire change worldwide. At Vital Voices, we believe in investing in women who are solving some of the world's greatest challenges. One of the ways that we do this is by showcasing them to the world. We believe that the power of shining a light on women leading change here in the United States and around the world is extremely powerful. And for that, we are very excited to be here today to be joined by some wonderful leaders and entrepreneurs from the Northwest region. For our conversation today, we're going to focus on entrepreneurship and the power of entrepreneurship. I have the pleasure of leading this conversation. My name is Eugenia Podeseta. I'm Senior Director at Vital Voices Global Partnership, and I have the wonderful privilege of overseeing the VV Grow Fellowship, which is a one-year accelerator for women-owned SMEs around the world. We've been around for about 8 years, and we're always looking for wonderful entrepreneurs, and we'll share more information about that at the end of the session. I'm also extremely passionate about this topic, as I'm also a social entrepreneur. I co-founded my own business about 5 years ago, Synergy Co-working in Madison, Wisconsin. And in this role, I also spearhead a number of leadership and engagement opportunities for women and communities of color. So we have the wonderful pleasure of being joined by Polly, Yakovich, and Laura James. Thank you so much, the two of you, for joining us today. And I'm going to share a little bit of information about each of them. So Polly is co-founder and chief strategist at Brave New, a Seattle-based digital marketing agency focused on helping businesses accelerate their growth through inbound marketing, branding, and web design. She also, so not just one, but two businesses, co-owns another business, Beast and Cleaver, a family-owned butcher shop and restaurant in Seattle's Ballard neighborhood, dedicating to sourcing only from local farms, using whole animals, and providing sustainable organic meat. Welcome, Polly. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Yeah.
Laura is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker with a passion for sharing the underwater world. Laura has been diving beneath the chilly Northwest waters, documenting the undersea world with her cameras for over 27 years. It is her hope that in doing so, more people will join in the fight to save not only Puget Sound, but shared waters around the world. She believes that people protect what they love, but they must know it to love it. And we only have one ocean, and we need to protect it. It's Laura's mission to connect people to our underwater world via film and multimedia with compelling stories that captivate and educate viewers young and old and inspire them to take action for our planet. Thank you again for both of you for joining us today. We're so excited about this conversation. And you know, as we know, in addition to the global crisis right now in 2020, you know, we've also been experiencing tremendous economic crisis on an unprecedented scale. The pandemic has created a demand shock, a supply shock, a financial shock all at once. Unemployment rates all over the country have skyrocketed, and we know that a lot of that unemployment is as a result of the pandemic and so many businesses facing the need to close or scale back operations because they're not able to sustain them, right? So clearly, it's not a great time to be an entrepreneur in a business. Yet, there is some silver lining, if we can call it that, because we are finding people really pivoting to find solutions to some of the challenges that they're facing. And they're also, in addition to just staying afloat, creating actually vibrant businesses through innovation and creativity. And believe it or not, we are seeing the formation of new businesses every day within this challenging time. So we're excited again to have you both here to hear about your experiences and really have this conversation around what it's been like, right? What it's been like. And so again, thank you all for joining us. For the beginning part of this conversation, I will be moderating just a conversation between Polly and Laura and myself. And then we'll open it up to questions. Feel free to put any questions in the chat and we'll make sure to get to them at the end of the conversation. So when turning to the first question, I really want to do a deep dive into what's happening around COVID response and the impact on entrepreneurs. And so I'd really like to get a sense from each of you, what have these last 9 months been like for you and your business? And Polly, let's start with you.
Yeah. The one maybe stupid enough to be a double entrepreneur. So it's really interesting and fun for me because I really get to see the market both on the B2B, business to business side with a marketing agency. We really focus on B2B. And then I get to be direct to customer on the butcher side, which is really fun. But I get to see sort of the market from a couple different sides. So I would say for the marketing agency, the last 9 months have been a lot about managing employees and learning to be really empathetic to what each individual person is going through. There was the initial send everyone home, make sure they can be functional from home. What materials do people need? Do you have kids at home? What is that like for you? And really trying to be really flexible and nimble for people. I would say on the B2B side, especially Q3, end of Q2, pipelines, I would say for new business really dried up because everyone was really retrenching and just not knowing what the future held. I think in Q4, we've seen that loosen a little bit because people are like, okay, I know where I'm at. The year's ending. I know what I can do and what projects I've put off. But I think a lot of people on the B2B side just sort of put off stuff. Do I need a new website? Maybe not right this minute. And there was a real juggle, right? For people who weren't already in the digital marketing space, it was like a rush to market because they had to catch up if they lost events and they lost person-to-person sales opportunities. So it's been really kind of an interesting juggle from a couple different perspectives, and walking people through that has been really interesting. I'd say on the butcher side, obviously we had to close down the restaurant piece right away, which for us was only like a night or two of a chef's tasting menu. So it wasn't the bulk of the business. And then it's been really interesting to be a neighborhood butcher shop during this time because people really came home and stayed. So there's more traffic in the neighborhood than there ever was. We're lucky not to be downtown where businesses kind of shut up and closed up their offices for a while. And then with all the rush on food supply, it's really been nice for us because our butcher shop, like you mentioned, is very intentional about food production and where we get our food from. And for us, it really catapulted an opportunity to be more educational with our audience about why we weren't concerned about our food supply because we just have opted out of this commodity meat environment from the beginning, and why local farm production was in no way harmed or at danger because they already have this system that's much more holistic and close to the ground and seasonal and all of those things. So for us on the butcher side, it was, we obviously have had our challenges with fear and managing, if somebody gets sick, are we going to have to close down? And what does that look like? And walking employees through, a really new thing for them, which was suddenly kind of being on the front lines of this pandemic and being essential workers, opening and operating a grocery store. And so, that's taken a lot of, I think, empathy and care and walking through with these people at, in varying ways. But really to be able to educate about food sources, food production, local food has been a really interesting experience on that business side. So I think, really navigating the butcher shop has been kind of booming for those reasons. And then on the marketing agency side, learning sort of like where to retrench with clients that have really kind of held it close to the vest and helping them keep all the right things on. It really depends on the client. But those have been kind of some high level things. Happy to dig into anything more specific as we go, but that's kind of how it's been for us the last 8 or 9 months.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And I think there definitely are very many parallels, right? If we look at what the last 9 months have been for entrepreneurs, it's been this roller coaster of halt and then extreme growth and then halt again, and then what's going to happen next, and really trying to figure that out. So I look forward to diving deeper, just thinking about the future and how the two of you will be maneuvering some of that process and that planning. But first, Laura, tell us from your perspective, what has the last 9 months been like for you?
Well, as a filmmaker and a freelance filmmaker, when we first heard about COVID, I was quite concerned because we are in contact with lots of people on sets, and they're pretty robust in nature at times. And almost immediately, once outbreaks started happening, both here in Seattle and down in LA, essentially the film industry shut down. And it's an interesting industry. It uses a lot of freelancers. I mean, yes, there are union jobs, but it's a lot of freelancers who are all entrepreneurs. We all have our own little filmmaking businesses. And I mean, to put it in perspective, right out of the gate, I lost $15,000 worth of business because I do every year for the past 5 or 6 years, I've done, we produce this program for sustainability ambassadors, and it's like kid TED Talks. We have kids up on stage. I run a 5-camera multicam production, and we make 25 to 30 videos. We have over almost 300 videos now in our library developed. It's experts and kids talking about incredible environmental issues around the Northwest. That instantly drove, when schools closed, that vanished. And so I had a pretty good idea of what things were gonna look like. And so I immediately started kind of shuttering everything myself, like, let's live really small because I know this is going to be a challenge. I also take care of my 88-year-old father. I'm his primary caregiver. And so immediately I had to think about, how am I going to protect him in this environment? What kind of jobs can I take? And so I immediately started, I'm lucky. I'm a very niche market filmmaker in the sense that I specialize in underwater productions and 360 or virtual reality productions. And also, luckily, some of that work can be done remotely, a lot of the editing and stitching. And so I, in my head, was already thinking, all right, what am I going to take? I'm going to do outside jobs, some drone work, undersea, and as much remote work as I can find. And so I was already kind of making those plans. And for the most part, that kind of, the plans, some of it is based on luck, because or preparation, if you will. I've worked really hard over the past decade to nurture friendships with other groups, people in my industry, which are nonprofits, because I'm also an ocean advocate and an environmental advocate. And one of the things I do is make affordable productions for nonprofits. And so I do have a good nonprofit rate, and I do a fair bit of work for the local nonprofits. And thinking about how those long-term relationships were going to play out was, it's really important to have these collaborations and these friendships, because in times of stress and need, those relationships are actually what keep you going. And wonderfully enough, or serendipitously enough, American Farmland Trust was collaborating with King Conservation District on this big project over the next 7 months. And I'd done work with King Conservation District, and we were all happy with each other. So when it was time to, find another videographer, they're like, hey, call Laura. And so that was a huge relief on my part, because I could visualize some work coming in. And so that was kind of a big breath of relief, if you will. But I know a lot of filmmakers who are having to make incredibly challenging decisions every day, putting their family at risk versus putting food on the table. And it's incredibly challenging. And of course, because we're freelancers, there's also challenges with how to get the support, the relief money. Because I sit and I watch every day on Facebook my friends who have been on call for hours and days with unemployment. Because as a freelancer, it's not as simple as just, hey, just apply for unemployment. Really, it's incredibly challenging, and so many of these people are literally hand to mouth right now. And so it's whenever I can see if I can collaborate with some of my friends who I know are also out of work. I do my best to try to bring them in on projects if at all possible. And one of the other things I've been able to do is diversify. I have another business that I've had for 12 years, and it's importing a product from the Netherlands called the Sheepy, which is a device for women so that they can go to the bathroom while they're on a long dive in a dry suit without having to wear diapers. And it sounds like kind of strange, but it really puts us on parity with men, male divers and male commercial divers who've had the same capacity for 100 years. And so 12 years ago, we leveled the playing field, if you will. And at the beginning of the year, just like everyone has mentioned, sales went way down because people were getting kind of nervous about what they were going to have to, what kind of money they were going to have. And this is a luxury item for diving women in a field that is already a luxury field. And so those sales went down, but then they kind of have crept back up again. And finally, just the kind of strangest, randomest thing I did was start making masks. I have a sewing machine, and I saw a desperate need for face covers in our region. And so I thought about it, and I have all these undersea programs, and they're mostly self-funded or donation funded. And so I thought, well, how about we do a fundraiser? Because I'm pretty sure that people aren't necessarily going to want to throw $20 at me for a mask. But I have a fiscal sponsor, nonprofit fiscal sponsor for my organization called Sustainable West Seattle. And they agreed to accept donations in exchange for masks. And so I've been able to raise a lot of money for my nonprofit selling masks, which has been great because then, of course, that's money that is not coming directly out of my pocket. And so that has been incredibly helpful as I've been trying to continue building that business during COVID. And so again, I want to throw
wonderful. I think both of you are sharing such amazing examples of, one of the challenging things is, okay, nobody wants to be put in a position where they're having to develop new skills and realizing that they don't have sort of crisis management alternatives in place where they can, okay, this is the plan, when things aren't working, revenue's getting hit in a really hard way. I don't know how next month is going to look. We don't really have that plan B. And I think the diversification of revenue, I think, is one of those lessons that is going to stick with many entrepreneurs for forever, probably, right? It's how not to depend and overly depend on just one stream of activities and one stream of income, and really think about all the different ways where we can actually create and make a livelihood, right? So I wonder from both of you, because there's also the element of learning new systems and processes that we probably had no need to learn before, like dealing with the federal government on some of this aid and relief, both federal, state, county. I'm sure, there's programs at every single level. And not necessarily things that we're accustomed to maneuvering. So I wonder, what skill sets have you identified that were surprising to you, things that you actually enjoy more than you thought you would? Polly, you mentioned the piece on empathy and just really understanding where people are coming from, because it's not just a business decision. It's not just a business pivot. We have to be aware of our surroundings and the reality that we live in. I'm wondering, what does that look like to you? What were some of those learnings? And how do you think those learnings are going to influence where you take your business in the future? I'm really curious about that. Polly, if you can answer that first.
Yeah. So you're right. It's not like we wouldn't have thought of ourselves as empathetic toward our employees before, but to be very intimately connected with appropriately keeping an eye on mental health has been really interesting. And I really have enjoyed, so I would say on the agency side, I have a business partner and we have about 10, I think 11 employees. We flex up and down a couple and work with freelancers as well. And then on the butcher side, my husband and I have 4 employees. So, around 10, 15 employees between the two. And so to open up conversations around mental health and really embracing the conversations like it's okay to not be okay. Because during the season, it's like we've had the pandemic, we've had Black Lives Matter movement, we've had a really contentious election. Like people, it's very stressful. People have kids at home. They have all myriad of things like Laura, maybe taking care of parents, unsure of the right things to do. And so opening a conversation in a slightly easier way around like, we have to be able to share with each other because we can't, as employers, do what we need to do to move things out of your way or give you time off or give you space if we don't know. And so just creating an atmosphere where it's like, you actually don't have to be okay. If you have 2 kids at home that you used to be, you're used to being at camps or school or what have you, and your capacity is limited, like really opening that conversation up about like, we're all in this together. Like if you can only work 30 hours a week, let's be honest about that and deal with that without there being a feeling of like your job is at risk. And let's just like do this together, because that's really all we have is each other. And we're going to come through this if we lean on each other. And so that's been a really big one for us. One thing that I think has been really challenging is, we talk a little bit about as entrepreneurs, like, this cycle and this learning cycle, and whether you applied for the PPP or whether you're dealing with unemployment. I would say the longer that I'm in business, and there's no like perfect time, but I do think making hard decisions comes faster the more that you've had to make hard decisions. So like things that we would have probably hung on to a lot longer, we were like, actually, we're just gonna go, because our experience has taught us that we're gonna like drag this stuff through. We're gonna bleed in the 3 to 6 months it takes us to make some hard decisions, and then we're gonna regret that we didn't move sooner. And so I think just that like benefit risk assessment comes a little faster the more you're in it, because being an entrepreneur, you just learn like, whether it's, whatever it is, whether it's a pandemic or whatever, there's just always something. And so having to like learn faster has been really helpful. I also think like thinking big while managing conservatively is a real challenge, because everyone wants to plan and look at their year and what are we looking like and what is our revenue. And obviously you have to make smart financial decisions while trying to protect your employees. But trying to sort of like balance both has been challenging. And I think that that's just another learning curve as well, is like, how do I plan while sort of like holding everything with open hands, because I can only do so much. And, for us, at least on the marketing side, I would say on both, like philosophically, we're just very about like, we can only control what we can control. And it sounds pie in the sky and it's not always achievable, but like losing sleep over all the things that we can do nothing about, we've just learned it doesn't benefit us. Like it harms our mental health, it makes us stressed out. And so if we can just like, we can only control what we can control. We're going to try and be really open in conversation with one another. We're going to make smart decisions based on the information we have. And then we're going to hold the rest very openly, because it could change tomorrow, it could change next week, we could do another lockdown, like all these things are unknown. And so really trying to like not angst too much so we can help keep our organizations moving has been, I think, a leadership challenge that will stay with us. Like those lessons will definitely stay with us.
That's so powerful. I mean, everything you've shared is so powerful. You see me nodding, and I'm going to nod because everything
all
you
entrepreneurs are like,
yes,
adapt, flexible,
absolutely.
you never know. Yeah.
But it is that the relationships with who we work with are changing, right? They have changed. They won't go back. I mean, there's absolutely been a pivotal change. Decisiveness. I mean, you hit on it. I mean, if I look at so many of the entrepreneurs that we work with, as well in Vital Voices, how they felt making certain very difficult decisions 6 months ago to where they are now. I mean, it's a world of change. And you're right. It's like you're going through so many trials by fire that you get to the point where you are developing that aptitude to be more decisive and make harder decisions. I do think that that last element that you touched on, the whole thinking big while still, operating from a conservative standpoint, is huge. And that's one of the issues that we're all dealing with right now. So in addition to the question that I asked Laura, which is about, how are you holding on, or what are the things that that you've learned that you're probably gonna hold on to? What does that look like for you? What do you see the next 6 to 9 months? Because, no one has the crystal ball. The only thing we know is that we don't know and we won't know, right? And so there's this, how do you plan and still put all the energy where you need to put it when there's so much uncertainty? So I'm wondering how that's been working out for you, Laura, and what you can share.
I think one of the biggest things I've really learned that's really been brought home to me was how collaboration is so key at all levels, not just the business, but the personal level too. Um, it has been a situation where we're sitting and I'm watching my hairdresser literally just went out of business yesterday, and I've been going to her for 20 years. She's been in business for 30 years. I frequented her because it's a woman-owned business, and I truly, became friends with the owner and love them. And I'm just heartbroken to see that. And I see that all over the place. I'm watching all these people. So mental health is really, it's like, oh God, am I next? I just talked to my business partner on the East Coast, and he's got a maritime imaging production business. And they're definitely trying to writing for every grant we can and find ways to keep the business afloat during these tough times. But the biggest thing I think is for our mental health and the future of all our businesses, learning to, as she said, think big, but also think about what is attainable at this moment. And collaboration, asking for help. That for me has always been a challenge as a woman entrepreneur. When you ask for help, it's almost like you're saying, well, yeah, I'm not good enough. It's an internal thing. It's not that, but in our heads, sometimes you feel that way. If I'm having to ask a guy for help, wow, is that because I'm, why am I having to do that? Well, you don't realize that men ask each other for help all the time. That's the old boys club. We just we're never raised to have this kind of old women's club ourselves. And so finding it in your heart to ask for help, not as failure, but as collaboration for the future, has been really key for me. And I've managed to build partnerships that are going to benefit both parties no matter what happens with the pandemic. Working with a company called Mixed Reality, and they do VR training and education, and want to bring more 360 video into the mix, so to speak. And I've begun collaborating with them, and we both had things that we needed, and we got to talking, and it's like, hey, this is perfect. I make 360 video. I need some more devs for my project. Like, I'm happy to trade some 360 video for some dev time. So finding ways to work around um, the banking, is for a better way to put, for a simple way to put it, it's like, what can we do to work with each other that will benefit both parties, that isn't actually going to cost us money, that we're going to, have to make a decision. Do we put food on the table, or do we push our business forward? Finding ways to continue your company that benefits all the parties, but is also not siphoning off of your ability to survive, I think is kind of key. And also on the emotional side, as Polly mentioned, the mental health side, you put everything into your business every day, and you got nothing when you come home, and all of those stressful things that Polly mentioned, they impact not only the owners and the employees, they impact everybody. And so, yeah, I feel that too. And how do you, remembering that even though we have tons of time and we're sitting around here on quarantining, we have to remember that we still have to take a little bit of time for ourselves and center ourselves and protect our ability to help be a partner, if you will, because if we're getting frustrated and our mental health is failing, then we can't be supportive to other people around us.
So that takes me to a segue, right? Because one of the issues that we care about deeply as Vital Voices is how do we also, in addition to the work that we do in our work hat, right, whether that's a business owner or political leader, also give back in our communities. And this whole series is about amplifying voices in the region, in the Northwest region. And I'm wondering, so Laura, you mentioned a little bit about identifying need for masks and other things, and as if you both didn't have enough to do, right? What does that look like for you? What does community engagement look like for you in the Northwest? What are some of the trends that you've seen? What are some of the opportunities that you've seen? And lastly, how do you balance your role as a business leader or leader of businesses, right? And nonprofits and everything that you're doing with that role in the community as well, which can be a hard balance to strike. Share with us a little bit of that experience. Laura, we'll start with you.
Sorry, I was like, that one's that's kind of that's a big that's a big old mouthful there. I kind of got my community involvement starts with my neighbors, and it's gonna kind of sound all super cheesy and cliche, but I'm an introvert, and I really like looking through the camera, and I can do both sides. I can be in front of the camera, behind the camera, talking about environmental stuff, but direct human connection has sometimes been a little bit of a challenge for me. It's really easy to be on camera. You're talking to the world, but you're talking to the camera, right? And so what I've done is branch out locally. Like my neighbor behind the house is a teacher, and neighbor down the street is an accountant, and I like to bake. And so I've been making sourdough bread, and I share it with my neighbors, and then they in turn share produce from their garden or cheese from their farm with me. And so like I said, again, it sounds kind of cheesy and cliche, but building it your backyard, taking care of your backyard and your direct community feeds right into with my environmental aspects. When you take care of the garbage in the gutter in front of your house, and then on your street, and then you start picking up the trash on your beach, and you start paying attention to these things in your place, what you consider place matters. Like your place matters so much, because if you don't care about your house, how can we even imagine that you're going to care about somebody else's house or some shared waterway? And so that community starts at home, and that collaboration starts at home, and figuring out, making friends with your neighbors. Not all of them, you don't have to be like super loquacious, but just kind of connecting to them. And that has been starting that on the home front has also allowed me to utilize that same technique in the business. And so just kind of building these friendships, it is a ripple effect. Once you start doing it, you continue. It's just like conservation and environmental stuff. Once you recycle that first can, suddenly you start seeing other things you can recycle. And then you start seeing other things you can do in your life that will be beneficial to the environment. And then pretty soon you're riding your bike to work one day a week. All of this stuff, you start tiny and you'll see it blossom if you nurture it.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think that absolutely captures our experience as well with Vital Voices and what we call the multiplier effect, right? When you start with one woman, and what does that lead to? It's just amazing to see how that extends and over time. So what does community engagement look like to you, Polly?
Yeah, I think on the agency side, for us, we do some of the traditional things. We do some pro bono work for nonprofits locally. And we are trying to be supportive of some issues that have come along, particularly in the last year. I think underneath it all, for both businesses, it really sort of all emanates out of being really transparent and sharing with employees about what your values are, right? And I think at first, when I first started the marketing agency, I felt a little bit shyer about whether or not I could be honest about my personal values and impose those on my employees. But I think that one of the nice opportunities for both businesses this summer, particularly with conversations really coming more into the public sphere, is just being able to be a little bit more like stake in the ground. Like, this is who we are. This is who we are as owners. This is what we believe. These are the values of our companies. And it's been really nice to be a little bit more upfront with that, and then have the conversations that result as a result of sharing that. I would say on the butcher shop side, it's a little bit more fun because we have a local hub, right? We're in the neighborhood. We are a place. We interact with customers daily. And so we get to share and have that conversation every day. And that conversation has really ranged from what we believe about eating animals. And regardless of whether you believe that eating animals is the right choice, like doing that in a sustainable environmental way and why that's important, and being very, very openly communicative about like, sorry, we don't have any ribeyes for you today because we only buy whole animals and we will use that whole animal up before we will get another one. And just being really, we decided really early on, like, this is our stake in the ground that we believe, and people can come along or they cannot. And obviously there's other business decisions that come into that. We felt the same way about Black Lives Matter this summer. Like, this is a human issue, and there's like no maybe or this side or that side. Like, there's just like the side of being for other humans. And we were very bold about that. And one of the things that was nice about that is, social media, for all of its here, there, whatever, whether it was in person or in social media, we got to have lots of conversations with people, both in person and in social media. And some people were like, bye, I'll never come back again. And we were like, that's totally fine. We are always going to stand for these things. And so you can take your business elsewhere. And just being able to very early, because the shop opened December 31st of last year, being able to be about important things very early. Obviously, we're in the Ballard neighborhood. We're a very liberal place to live in this world, but to be very firm about what our values were, and then to, in a respectful way, be like, we are going to be about these things, even when it's hard, even when you might not agree with us, has really allowed for a lot of good conversation and has brought in people who really feel like the shop is a safe place for them. Like, we were very like, we wanted to sponsor, the neighborhood around us had a Black Lives Matter rally, and we were like, let's not ever operate out of fear. We're always going to operate out of like love and compassion. So let's put up tables with free things for people, and let's make sure that we are providing our bathroom for everyone, when other businesses maybe were like closing up because they were nervous, is this gonna go this way or that? And so we just have chosen to be really bold, and it's given us really a nice platform that people know where we stand on things and they feel safe with us, hopefully. And we've also really been able to be like, hey, people in our community are really hurting right now. So we are going to match all funds to the Ballard Food Bank. That's a local resource that we can match. And we've periodically run some campaigns. Sorry, marketer can never totally get it out of my vernacular, but we've run some campaigns where it's like, okay, for this period of time, we're going to match your donations 2-to-1. Please donate them directly, and just been really concerned with people's food needs. We've also done some things, and it's hard to get the word out about stuff like this, but for people early on in the restaurant community who lost their jobs, we were like, please come in and we will feed you. And so just having this spirit, I think, has really enabled us to grow a platform of people who know what we're about and know that we're not going to be shy to be about those things. And it's been really super rewarding and fun. I think if it was my first business, a butcher shop, I would have been more nervous to be bold. But I think as I've gotten older and over time, I'm just like, life is short. And so we're going to really be about these things that we think are important in this world. And we're going to be bold about that. And it's been very rewarding for us, both in attracting the clientele who wants to support us as that kind of business, and also just in relationships.
It's interesting where we are, right? Where you're seeing how our personal values are necessarily having to merge and really be at the forefront of our businesses and our brands as businesses. And I think as we move into the future, that's going to become even more important, where you can't be sort of wishy-washy. You're going to have to be clear about what you stand for. And that's becoming more and more critical as we try to survive as well as, in our different sectors and the businesses that we run. So this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I would go on and on. I have so many questions I would love to continue to ask you. But I do want to close with one question, and then we'll open it up to the Q&A, which is, we work with Vital Voices. We have a network of over 18,000 women around the world. Many of them are entrepreneurs. Some of them are probably aspiring to be entrepreneurs in the near future or longer down the road. What advice or guidance do you have for them? And I'll start with you, Laura.
My advice would be just do it. I mean, it sounds, again, cliche, but I started my first business when I was around 19 or 20. I opened a scuba diving shop, and it was down on the waterfront, and I was all balls and no brains. I thought I could do better. I was so sure I could do better. And I opened that and ran that for 7 or 8 years, and then moved on to the medical field. But it was wonderful. It was challenging. I wouldn't trade the experience for anything. And then with the sheepy business, with my filmmaking business, a decade ago, a little over, 12, 13 years ago, I decided to leave the golden handcuffs of hospital life and make a filmmaking. I wanted to capture visual images, and it's like, can I do this? Can I live a life where I don't have guaranteed insurance and a guaranteed paycheck and do this scary freelance thing? And all I can say is I wouldn't trade it for the world. I say, believe in yourself. And even if you don't 100% believe in yourself, just believe in yourself. Fake it a little bit. Fake it till you make it. I hate saying that, and I hate doing that, because it implies that you don't know, that you don't have the knowledge to do something. But I don't think, when I say fake it till you make it, I don't mean you don't have the knowledge. What I mean is maybe you don't have in here the self-confidence to do it. So fake your self-confidence until you have it. And that for me was one of the biggest lessons. Of course, when I was 19, I had all the confidence in the world because I was so sure. It's more as we get older and we see the world around us that we start to get more tentative and be less bold, if you will. And so Polly's advice to be bold, I think, is very pure and very true. And we have to hear that and just do it. If you have that idea, just follow it, just chase it and grab it by the tail and make it your own.
Wonderful. Polly.
Well, I agree like 1,000% with both of those things. Those were on my list too. I think for a lot of people who feel like the plan gives them some safety, rest assured, nothing about being an entrepreneur will allow you to be safe or follow a plan. And it's like, no matter what you think is going to be the thing that gets in your way and you plan around it, it's going to be a different thing. So you just have to take initial steps. And I know that there's lots of different people have different environmental and life situations, and that may sound like too easy of advice, but I do think just moving forward all the time, moving forward is like, you're going to gain the skills that allow you to go around that barrier that you wouldn't have ever been able to guess was going to show up anyway. So it's all going to get thrown out the window. You do have to balance like believing in yourself, people are all the time going to tell you your business idea is like no good. People who are really smart. Nobody told us opening a butcher shop that specialized in like European style charcuterie was a brilliant idea to do in this Ballard neighborhood, but we just believed that we were so good at it. My husband is so good at it that it was like, well, we believe in ourselves, so we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of things about capital and startup capital and things that are hard, but I would say like you can always do something. You can always start small. You can do something like, so just starting, I think that's really important. And then to Laura's piece about collaboration, I do think that that's something that's coming out of this time. And I also think, like on the marketing agency side, we belong to a cohort of other agency owners and we just openly share. And I think that that is kind of coming down into this, trickling down into other industries in this time. I've been really shocked as I've been in the restaurant industry, like how little people openly share their issues with each other, and they all have the same issues. And if you had a bunch of people sitting around the table talking about the same issues and solving them with and for each other, you just leapfrog forward. I don't believe in recreating the wheel. People have encountered the same things you have, and learning from their expertise and getting the confidence that comes from other entrepreneurs being like, I believe in you, you can figure it out, you'll do it. So I think get started, but then also like find your group. And it doesn't have to be in your industry, but it could, but like find a group of people that helps you when you feel like you want to give up, because you will. And that is going to help you move forward. And then also like, leapfrog over some of these things that you've never dealt with before that you could gain from their expertise, and then you can move forward much faster. So those are sort of my high level pieces that I would encourage you to think about.
Those are wonderful. And I think they also, I'm looking at the questions here that have been posed and absolutely get at a lot of what is being asked, right? Like, so what are the things that have to be just absolutely fundamental in the way that we operate and in the way that we think? And both of you have touched on so many of them. I would just like to ask you to expand on one topic in particular, which is really the sort of mental health, sort of confidence. How do each of you, what are the mechanisms you use to feel comfortable with the uncertainty, right? Because I think a lot of people just have a really hard time with the anxiety that provokes. And I think entrepreneurship is not for everybody, right? So if you need more certainty in your life, it's not necessarily the right way to go. But the whole idea that there is no such thing as safety, Laura, is 100% key. We have to accept that as truth. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's going to be one thing or it's going to be another. But the fact that it's going to be something is the only guarantee that we have, right? But what do you do? What are the mechanisms? How do you help yourself just be calm and address those challenges as they come up?
Who first? Me? Okay. I will say, and this is gonna sound cheesy, I go with the flow to a degree. So, and it's not exactly how you think. When I'm coming up with a new idea, or I have an idea in my head and I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. Like my maritime archaeology simulator that I've wanted to do for 20, 30 years, like where we take scans of a shipwreck and we put it into a virtual space so people can swim around it like a video game, and archaeologists can explore these high definition photogrammetry images. Well, for a long time, first it was like, well, maybe I'm going to have to learn to do that. Maybe I'm going to have to learn to do all this stuff. But then I saw lots of people around the country who are making these beautiful scans, and maybe instead of having to push upstream and learn all this stuff, I can take knowledge that I'm already gaining from another project and flip that and use that for this. And all of a sudden, everything started to flow in the right direction. I got these collaborations from my friend Evan Kovacs, who does some of the most incredible world-class scans. And I'm learning Unity so I can build the world building. And so I can take his scans, and he always wanted to do the same thing, but never had the time to sit down and actually learn the development program. And so suddenly we're moving forward, and it just feels like you're going with the flow. And so the biggest thing I've learned as well is that if you're bashing your head against that wall constantly, that's what really harms your mental health. in my mind, because then you hit the wall and you feel like, gosh, maybe this isn't such a good idea. Maybe I suck. Well, in reality, maybe you're just at the wrong time. It literally could be the wrong time and the wrong place in the industry. An example would be, we set up, we had a book came out, We Are Puget Sound, this last year. And it's a beautiful book. It's an ode to Puget Sound and the people protecting it. And I was included in it. And one of the things that was included in that is that I was going to bring all of my Oculus headsets on the book tour, which meant, like, to me, this is amazing. This is like free marketing for Virtual Sailors Sea. Like, this is amazing. And then COVID hit and shut down all of the book tour. And so now I'm sitting here, I've got 100 Oculus Go headsets full of beautiful virtual reality footage. And I'm like, oh, please get a vaccine. Because, I've got enough headsets to run events without anybody ever having to touch the same headset, but you're still bringing groups together. So, it was like, for a minute we were going with the flow, and then we ran into a brick wall. And I used, instead of worrying and stressing about that so much, I used that time to then build this friendship and collaboration with Mixed Reality, which were the devs I mentioned earlier. It's a multinational company that does these trainings and things like that. And they were like, oh my gosh, this maritime archaeology simulator is right in line with stuff. Every year they donate a whole bunch of work hours to VR for Good and virtual reality projects that will better humanity. And this year they selected the Maritime Archaeology Simulator, along with Oculus selecting it as part of their Oculus Start program. So it's all about finding that path in the river. Sometimes you got to find the eddy and rest off the side of it for a minute and get out of the flow and catch your breath and pull your head together. And then you jump back out in there and you're ready to fight. That's how I do it anyway.
Love it. So inspirational. How about you, Polly?
I'm going to talk just like briefly about a couple of things that I have really embraced in this season. I think for me, a couple of things that are foundational for me personally is like, I think my facade is like a little more sarcastic and, dubious about things, but underneath I'm such an optimist. And I think most entrepreneurs are deeply, deeply optimistic. And I try and I always think about it in this context, particularly for my employees on the marketing side. It's just like to always step back and think about the perspective. Like in the long arc of things, I think things generally work out. If your head's down about this moment, it's like, yeah, this is not good and doesn't feel great. But when I look back on this time, and I always try and do this, so 3 years from now, when I look back on this time, I'm going to be like, oh, that was a really crappy year and a half, couple years. That was brutal. I hated it. Let's never do that again. But it is going to be this like finite memory at some point. And so I always keep my eye focused on that horizon of like 5 years from now. What do I want to take from this time? What will I have learned? What's going to stick with me in a positive way? That's not just like I slogged through and I struggled and I, whatever it is. I also think like this summer, I've really tried to embrace, and this is hard, I think, for any entrepreneur. You talked about balance earlier. Like, I just don't know if I believe in balance anymore. It's all about like ebbing and flowing and trying and not beating yourself up for what didn't go well yesterday and just trying again today. And I've really embraced my physicality more than I had in the past. I used to always think more in terms of like, oh, well, I can just trade away a couple hours of sleep easily and stay up and finish that thing. Or I'm going to trade away my workout because of X, Y, and Z. And so I've just really realized how much my mental health is influenced by that physicality. So like, I do need to sleep. I do need to work out. It's funny being in your 40s. I'm like, I used to work out for my body and now I work out for my mind. And it really matters. And to do that and see the difference even in my own self and how much more calm I am when I like hit or miss on my meditation practice, hit or miss on my workouts. But I think the net effect of really giving myself time to be like, I'm stealing from myself and my capacity to help parent or be an employer or to be a manager or whatever it is. And so it's given me, I think, more of justification to prioritize those things, because I see the benefit and other people around me do too.
The stealing, I love that. The way you put that, it's just that will be ingrained in my head. Am I stealing? You know,
I read this amazing book this summer, and I read it twice. It's called Essentialism. And it talks about that piece about how by not making a choice, we just trade away our lives and we let our time be stolen from how we would choose to spend it. And so I really recommend that book to anybody who's looking to sort of like, an entrepreneur's need to focus, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff we do doesn't actually matter or get us anywhere. And so that book has been super, super helpful to me and helped crystallize some of these things and give me, you know, a little bit more permission to take care of myself.
Yeah, I found a virtual reality game called Supernatural that it's
Oh, nice.
an app. And because I'm already working in virtual reality, I was able to more kind of justify it in my head. But since, you know, no gyms or anything, it's a full body workout. And, you know, they have daily workouts with coaches and the whole 9 yards. And yeah, sometimes the coaches bug me and I just turn them down and play my own music. But it has been so important. And I do absolutely and they have short workouts too, you know, so like 20 minutes. So maybe I don't feel like I can do a whole thing, or maybe I just need some stress relief right now. They've got little what are called quick hits workouts, and so you do like 10 minutes of just incredibly intense physical exercise, and then you can go on with your day. You're nice to your spouse again, nice to the kids again, you know, and you get that because it's actually hammering on balloons to popular music. And so it's really fun. And they don't have, one thing they've done differently is they don't have timers in it. And so you literally get in there. These are huge natural expanses, which kind of feed into our loss of place and space outdoors now that we're quarantining. One thing we've seen is people are desperate for nature, which feeds my business just fine, virtual nature at least. But the game kind of picked up right at they have a Facebook group, and so many people jumped on it and have actually said a lot of the same things that you have said, how it has basically saved their mental health during COVID times, because you have a virtual reality escape. You're completely removed from your home that you've been staring at the darn walls for 9 months now. And just it's fun without timers or stress. And so to the exercise point, that has been super helpful. And actually I've made physical gains that I never made before COVID. So, hey, thanks COVID. Makes me a better diver, makes me a better filmmaker. I'm much stronger. So yeah.
So many wonderful things, really, really. And I applaud both of you. Thank you for all you've shared, your generosity with all the lessons learned and the advice and your experiences, which I'm sure have been full of ups and downs. Again, great gratitude for this opportunity to have this conversation. I know we're out of time, unfortunately, but luckily there will be more of these conversations. This is just the first event. And we would love to also, again, thank Rasha Kamia, the Event Horizon and the Northwestern Council for putting this on. We're looking forward to the future opportunities to host other women leaders, amazing women leaders like yourselves. For all of you listening, interested in being a part of either the Northwest Council or learning more about Vital Voices, please absolutely reach out. We do have applications open right now for one of our signature programs on the entrepreneurship side, which is the VV Grow Fellowship, which is a 1-year accelerator for women-owned small, medium enterprises. And you can find that information on our website, but I'm also happy to answer any questions for anybody who's interested in learning more. Again, it's all about not only looking at how we succeed in business, but really how do we utilize a platform of that business in our leadership to bring about greater change in our communities, but in the world. So I thank you very much on behalf of Vital Voices for joining us today. Really appreciate it, and have a good weekend.